It's another Tisha B'Av. Another year sitting on the floor, fasting, mourning, destruction of the Beis Hamikdash, the exile of the Jewish people. And the fact is that most of us have difficulty understanding the significance of the day, why this is so important to everybody. It's almost 2,000 years. I understand when we read about the pogroms, I understand when we read about the Holocaust, I understand when we read about the Inquisition. Okay, we're going through a rough time now. There's been tragedy. But nothing like what the Jews have suffered throughout history. For centuries, Jews were kicked out of towns, thrown out, leave, clothes on your back, leave behind your homes, your businesses, your possessions. Abandon everything with the clothes on your back. In Spain, the Jews were an aristocratic class of people living on a very high level. They left with nothing. Boats attacked by pirates, sold as slaves, wandering from place to place. We have nothing to compare this to. My brother Gedalia, for his bar mitzvah present, asked to go on a teen tour to Yerushalayim, 1966. Yerushalayim was still divided. If you wanted to see the old city, you got up on the roof of Heichel Shlomo, looked off into the distance. Now, Yerushalayim, building roads, tunnels, trains. Israel is viewed as a world power on the world stage. It's a whole different world. And one Tisha B'Av, this Rav gets up and he says, I don't know what all the mourning is about. I don't see destroyed temples. I see buildings. I see yeshivas. I see everything being built. I see Jews with an army. I see security. We don't even understand what we lost. We don't even understand what it's supposed to be. The kinna that I want to speak about this year is one with a painful refrain. In mine, it's Lamed Beis. Etzbo sai shoflu, the Eshio sai noflu oya. We went down from our greatness, and the city has fallen. Oya. B'nai Tzion golu v'kol oivei shalu. B'nai Tzion have gone into Gullus, and all the enemies are at peace. Oy meheyalanu. Oy. Oy, what we used to have. Oy. Bayis v'azaros b'yom af nigoros. The Beis Hamikdash and all of its azaros in the day of anger they collapsed, they were destroyed. Oya, and they sarim v'soros, and the faces of the princes and princesses, Kamoshulai Kaderis, became like blackened pots. And it goes on. Ateres Tiferes La'aretz Nigreris, our crown and our glory dragged down. Al Shulchan v'Kelev Me'il al Shulav, the Shulchan and the Kelim in the base of Mikdash, the Me'il, the base of Mikdash, wore with the little bells and balls at the end. Menorah Tahira Ora Ne'adora Oya, the light of the menorah, everything is gone. It's not a building. We're not mourning the destruction of a building. We're not even mourning the loss of life. Unfortunately, there's been a tremendous amount of Jewish blood spilled over the centuries. I had wanted to take out an ad at one point when all of the commotion was going on in America called Jewish Lives Never Matter. The same people who are worried about certain lives mattering, the worst anti-Semites out there. Nobody cares about Jewish lives. But that's not the focus of Tisha B'Av. Yes, we use it as a basis to talk about all the suffering and all the terrible things that have happened, but that's not the emphasis. What's the emphasis? The Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, and we were given permission to rebuild it. And Chagai Hanavi, in Perek Aleph, Pasuk Gimel says, V'hi dvar Hashem b'yad Chagai Hanavi Lemor. Hashem spoke to Chagai saying, Ha'es lachem atem l'sheves b'batechem svunim v'abayis zecharev. You sit secure in your houses, and the Beis Hamikdash is destroyed. V'yata kama Hashem spakais simu levavchem al dachayim. Put your hearts on your ways. Zeratim harbe v'havi ma'at. You plant and you only harvest a small amount. Says Rashi, the avon bikurim shabotlu, because there's no bikurim, because there's no Beis Hamikdash to bring it to, and because you were mevatel it, so therefore you don't bring in the harvest the way you should. You eat and you're not satiated. Says Rashi, ba'avon bittul menachos, because you don't bring the menachos on the mizbech anymore, the meal offerings. Shasu ve'en l'shachra, you drink wine and it doesn't have its usual effect. Says Rashi, shenitul tam hayayin lefisha batlu hanesachim. Wine has lost its power because you don't bring the wine offerings anymore. Lavush ve'en l'chaim lai. You wear clothing and it doesn't keep you warm. Says Rashi, ba'avan bigdei kahuna shabatlai, because there's no bigdei kahuna. But mistake altzra nakuv, and all the money that you make, it's like you're putting it into a bag with a hole in it. Kol revach, says Rashi, kol revach sha'atem oisim holech v'kola, it disappears as if you put it into a bag with a hole. Kol ma Hashem tzvakoi simu levavchem al dachei. So it says, Hashem, think about what you're doing. The Mesil Shosharim, when he quotes this pasuk, he says, Chagai tzoveach. Chagai was yelling and says, Simu levavchem od archeihem. Now, how did the Ramchal know that he was yelling? There's no audio file that comes with it. The answer is obvious because he repeated it twice for emphasis. Simu levavchem od archeihem. Think. You remember when there was a Beis Hamikdash. It wasn't destroyed that long ago. You remember what food tasted like. You remember what it was like when you harvested your crops. You know what the wine is supposed to taste like, what clothing is supposed to taste like. Don't you see you're living a shadow existence? Think. Those were people who saw the first Beis Hamikdash. They remember what it was all about. Rabbi Shimon Gamliel was Mevatel Megillah's Tainus, the Megillah that discusses all the special happy days and sad days on the Jewish calendar. Why? He says something very powerful. He says, just like a needle in dead flesh, you have a part of your body that the skin is dead, the needle doesn't hurt. That's us today. He was speaking one generation after the Churban. His father, Rabbi Gamliel, was alive in the time of the Beis Hamikdash of Shimon Gamliel, one of the Asara Arugei Malchus. It was one generation later, and he said, we're dead. We don't feel anymore. We don't know what it is to be happy, and we don't know what it's like to be sad because we've lost a part of what makes us people. That was 2,000 years ago. So now we talk about the Beis Hamikdash. You can't imagine what we're missing. You can't imagine. If Hamas doesn't shoot rockets at us, we're happy. The ceasefire. If people aren't stabbing people on their way to the Kotel in the old city, we're happy. People aren't throwing rocks and firebombs at our cars. We're happy. That's all it takes for us. We can go out to eat in restaurants. Drink the finest wine. Drink the finest scotch. Go stay in the finest hotels. Stay in palaces. What are we really missing? Okay, every now and then, some of us get killed. But for the most part, things are great. Because we don't even know what we're missing. Take one day to think about what your life could be like. If Mashiach would come, the Beis Hamikdash would come. You came to the Beis Hamikdash and you could feel the Shekhinah. You could feel God's presence. Nevi'im got their Ruach HaKodesh from the Beis Hamikdash. Is there a God? Is there not a God? Is he watching me? Is he not watching me? Those were questions you could only ask when the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed. When there was a Beis Hamikdash, when there was Nevuah. Rashi says that Zvulun used to do business with people. They would come to do business with him. They said, as long as we're here, let's go to Yerushalayim and see their Beis Hamikdash. And they would be so overwhelmed that they would become Jews. They could feel the Shekhinah. It was real. Atheist is a Greek word. A means not, like asymmetrical, atypical. Theo is God. An ist is a believer. Atheist, one who believes there's no God. That's a Greek word. The Greeks invented the concept of atheism because until then there was Nevuah. There was a Beis HaMikdash with all of the power of the first Beis HaMikdash. The Shekhinah was there. You couldn't deny God exists. Okay, so you could be led astray by Avodah Zarah and by other things and by your taivas, but that God doesn't exist, it wasn't a possibility. You could feel him. Three times a year, you'll come to Yerushalayim Lir Ois to see Hashem. That's how real the experience was. Like you would see HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The Jews were the intellectual leaders of the world. It's ironic that there are Bible scholars who suggest that certain books of Tanakh could not have been written by the Jews because they're clearly of Greek influence. They can't even begin to imagine maybe the Greeks took it from us. Of course not. The Greeks are the intellectual elite, that they would come and go to the Jews. Shlomo Melech would have written Koheles. Can't be. It's Greek. That they could have stolen from us. We were the intellectual powerhouse of the world. We were the spiritual center of the world. We were the physical center of the world. Chazal tell us until the Churban, everyone knows that the Jews were the most beautiful people on earth. Josephus writes this, even in the time of the Romans, everyone knew. The Jews were the most beautiful people in the world. Josephus writes that Eretz Yisrael was so fertile that anyone who had a piece of land planted because it was silly, just threw the seeds in the ground and it grew. It's the most beautiful land in the world. Can you imagine an existence with the Beis HaMikdash? All the bracha comes to the world through the Beis HaMikdash and spreads out every place else from there. We've never had a piece of meat. We have no idea what it means. We've never had a piece of bread. We never drank a glass of wine. We've never worn clothing. We've never had a sense of shalva and menucha, of peace and mind and rest. We've never had a spiritual experience. We only have shadows of shadows of shadows. We are a shadow people walking the world because we don't have the Beis HaMikdash. There's a school where you can go to the Kaisel, go to the Western Wall, daven for 40 days. You can get something. There was a girl, Balas Tshuva. She decided she was going to do this. She was going to go for 40 days and daven that she should have kavana in tefillah. Concentrate in her tefillah. She stopped at day 24 or 25, I don't remember. She said she couldn't handle it. She would open up the siddur and start to daven and her whole body would be shaking. Used to go to the Beis HaMikdash with a cloud hanging over it and feel Hashem's presence. You could have Nevi'im where HaKadosh Baruch Hu was speaking directly to you, not just in general, to you. Shlomo Melech loses his donkeys. He says, let's go find a Navi and ask him where our donkeys are and why Hashem had them disappear in the first place. What a hard question people ask me. What's my tafkid in this world? I don't know. I'm not a Navi. But when there was a Navi, you would go to him and say, what's my tafkid in this world? And he'd say, this is what Hashem has in mind for you. This is what you could do. This is who you could be. You would do a chait. You would do a sin. Bring a korban to the Beis HaMikdash. And you were cleansed. On Yom Kippur, they would hang a red string. And at some point, the Yom Kippur Avoda, during Yom Kippur, it would turn white, and everyone knew directly that Hashem forgave their sins. The happiness, the fulfillment. The Beis HaMikdash represents the love between a husband and a wife. That love in marriage was more intense when there was a Beis HaMikdash. The Telzer Rosh Hashiva once said, we think Mashiach will come and life will go on the way it is now. He says, imagine a world where everyone was blind. Society would build itself differently. And if suddenly everyone could see, they wouldn't just go on with life the way it is. Everything would change. When Mashiach comes, and once again we have a Beis HaMikdash and our eyes are opened, we're not going to have the same life. It's going to be a different life. The Gemara in Sukkah says they're going to take the Yetzer Hara out and shecht it. You'll know the truth. You'll feel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. You'll be the center of the world. Everyone will know for sure. Everyone will recognize HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Everyone will recognize the truth of the Torah. Everyone will feel Hashem in their lives. Your meat will taste different. Your bread will taste different. Your wine will taste different. Your clothing will be different. You're a blind person who suddenly opens their eyes and sees the world, sees beauty, sees color. You're a deaf person who can suddenly hear music. One of the side effects of coronavirus was that there were people who lost their ability to smell and to taste. Some people never came back. Some people, when they finally were able to taste again, they said, you don't know what it's like to eat, have no taste in your food. You have no idea what it's like not to be able to smell anything. One young mother said, I had to keep checking the baby. I didn't know if he needed a diaper change. I couldn't tell. Imagine a life without smell or taste or hearing or seeing. And then suddenly it all comes back to life. What we're mourning on Tisha B'Av is the fact, not that we lost a building. It was a building that was an interface between Shemayim v'Aretz. Zeshar Shemayim. Malachim going up and Malachim coming down. This is where Shemayim v'Aretz comes together. That's what we lost. We lost a bias, a place where we could have an intimate relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We lost that power of our intellectual and spiritual greatness. Whatever we have is nothing by comparison. But we're okay. We're okay. It's good enough. No one's shooting missiles at us today. We got food on the table. It's good enough. It's good enough. It's tragic when you know you have something wonderful and you want to share it with someone and they're just not interested. You say, do you like music? Yes, I have the most beautiful piece of music. That's okay. You like tasty things? Yes, I have the most delicious thing in the world. Now that's all right. Did you ever daven a meaningful tefillah in your life? Yes. Yes, I have. Not often, but I can take you to a place where you will lift yourselves out of this world. Where the Hasidim Rishonim spent an hour before Shemona Esrei, an hour saying Shemona Esrei, and an hour coming down from the experience because they were so out of this world it took them a whole hour to come back down to life. I can give you that where you will daven and feel Hashem's presence. No, that's okay. That's enough. People are depressed. They don't care. They don't care. Like a needle in dead flesh. No feeling. We said it over in the past. Rabbi Orlofsky says, the Chazal tell us that in Olam Haba there's in Achila ve'in Shtiya, in Tashva Shemitah, in Masav Matan. All the things that we're not allowed to do in Yom Kippur, in Olam Haba they don't have any of those physical things. Just tzaddikim yoshvim b'atroseim b'rosheim. And so one day a year, Yom Kippur, we get a taste of Olam Haba. We don't eat, we don't drink, we don't do business. We just enjoy the presence of Hashem. And one day a year, we get a taste of Gehenna. And Achila ve'en Shtiya. There's none of those things, no physical pleasures, and also no learning Torah. Oy mehayalanu, we say in the Kinnah. If we stop and think about what we had, there was an Aron, HaKadosh Baruch Hu spoke in between the two Kruvim. There was a Shulchan. We put the lechem upon him, and the bread stayed warm a whole week. And from there came all of the power of food in the entire world. You brought a korban and you had a kapara. They offered up the kataris, the incense, and no woman in Yerushalayim ever wore perfume because the smell filled the whole city. It was so beautiful and so wonderful. Oy mehayalanu. Simu levavchem adarcheim, says Chagai. You know what the world could be like. We don't. We don't even know. We say Akina, oy mehayalanu. We try to recreate what it must have been like. In a world where there was a base of Mikdash, where Hashem's presence could be felt, where the cloud hovered over, where the goodness and the bracha spread all around the world, where everyone recognized the Jewish people and what they were. That's what we're missing. Not a building. It's a life. It's an existence. We're functioning at a tiny amount of our capacity to live as human beings. There's a famous story where Pesach Kron, whenever he speaks on Tisha B'Av, he always starts with that story. About these three soldiers, the 6-Day War when they liberate the Western Wall. And one is from, and he goes up, he leans against the wall, and he starts crying. The other two come from a non-religious kibbutz. One of them starts crying. And his friend says, what are you crying about? He says, I'm crying that I don't have anything to cry about. I don't even know. I don't even understand what's going on here. If we can't shed a tear that we don't have nevuah, if we can't shed a tear that we're living a shadow existence, if we can't shed a tear and we don't know what food or clothing is. So let's shed a tear. We don't even know what to shed a tear about. It's Hashem, this will be the last year that Tisha B'Av is a tragedy. And hopefully next year, Tisha B'Av will be a yontif that we'll celebrate together in the Beis HaMikdash from here.